Yo, what's going on today, guys? It's Dev. We have still, again, a lot of news to get into today. A lot of NFL offseason news, some NBA news, some March Madness news, and just a little bit of NFL draft news. A lot more of that will come closer to the draft. But let's just hop right into it. A team I was talking about last week that I was very upset with how they've handled everything was the Cincinnati Bengals. And guess what? I ate my words. Because they are paying Jamar Chase and T. Higgins a ton of money. Just an absolute unit of money. T gets a 4-year contract, $115 million. And Jamar Chase becomes the highest paid non-QB with a contract of 4 years, $106 million. Sorry, $161 million. That's $40.25 million a year. And as happy as I am because those players deserve it, the Cincinnati Bengals are paying almost $100 million annually to 3 players. If you don't know what the cap limit is in the NFL, meaning that each team has to stay under this amount of money annually every year. Obviously, every year it goes higher and higher and higher. But this year, it's $279.2 million a year each team has to stay under. The Cincinnati Bengals are paying 3 players $100 million. That means over a third of their money goes to 3 out of 52 active roster players. They're going to have to draft perfectly. I mean perfectly. To have a roster that can compete against anybody. These 3 players can compete against anybody in the NFL. That's not who I'm doubting at all. Has nothing to do with Joe or T or Jamar Chase. This has everything to do with they still have a lot of holes that need to be filled on that roster. Why do you think Trey Hendrickson is getting let go? Will they even have the money to re-sign Trey? Will they have any money to make any more splashes in NFL free agency to boost their roster? Just a wild turn of events. T and Jamar and Joe all deserve that money. But they still have 49 players that they have to pay with only 2/3 of their money. Right? That is crazy. How are the Cincinnati Bengals going to sign anybody with limited amount of money like that? You know? I am happy, though, that the Browns finally decided we're going to stop being cheap as owners and pay the players that deserve to be paid. Because guess what? If they didn't pay any of those 3 players, I would say at least half the NFL would. Half the NFL's teams would pay that much money for each of those players. If the Cincinnati Bengals as an organization would have just signed these players to earlier contracts via last year or even the year before and just extended these players, they would have paid a lot less money annually to pay all 3 of these players. Now, Joe was already signed to an extension the minute they could. But these receivers could have been played last year when T was on the franchise tag. T got franchise tagged this year. Luckily, he got a contract. Deservedly got a contract. Jamar Chase could have gotten an extension last year. I just don't know how they're going to continue to keep their roster elevated, make big splashes. They're going to have to get some key positions on rookie contracts to be able to pay the rest of their team. This is me just talking cap money. All three of those players deserve that money. Hell, they probably could have got more elsewhere. But the Bengals, obviously, like any team that would have drafted those players, wanted to keep them on the roster. There are a lot of teams in the NFL that have 2 high-paid wide receivers and a high-paid quarterback, like the Eagles do. They're paying, I think I read it the other day, that it was like $80 million that they're paying to Jalen and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So, it's not unheard of to have NFL teams like the Miami Dolphins pay 2 top-end wide receivers and to pay quarterback big money. But it does limit their ability to upgrade other positions. Probably why Trey isn't getting a contract when he deserves one. There are a lot of teams that are in need of defensive line. So I'm sure if the Bengals can't pay him, somebody will. The Cowboys traded DeMarcus Lawrence to the Seattle Seahawks. He says goodbye on Instagram. I didn't see this one coming. I'm not going to lie. Thought DeMarcus Lawrence was one of those players that would just kind of stay a Cowboy forever. Now, I don't know if he requested this or if the Cowboys just could not pay him or if it was because they wouldn't be able to pay him when his contract is up. So they figured, let's just get some picks in the draft rather than not be able to pay this guy and either have to franchise tag him or lose him anyway in free agency. The other day, CeeDee Lamb was on, I don't know who he was streaming with. He was streaming with a live streamer and was on his phone in the car. And he looks down at his phone and he goes, man, they traded him. The kid that's streaming him, the streamer, goes, what are you talking about? CeeDee goes, they traded DeMarcus. And you could see how devastated he was in his face, knowing that the Cowboys let him go. Not a lot of teams would have. A lot of teams would have figured out how to pay him. I have no idea if he was devastated because him and DeMarcus were close, or if it's because CD knows that Jerry Jones isn't going all in, isn't doing everything he can to make the Cowboys a competitive franchise. The Cowboys really haven't done that much in this offseason. They've signed a bunch of special teams players, including Kevontae Turpin, who is a dog. But they signed a long snapper and a punter, a return specialist, and Kevontae. They signed Javonte Williams from the Broncos. I can't tell you how much he frustrated me playing with him on fantasy. I really thought that he was going to be a legit running back out of college, going to the Broncos, becoming the number one guy. He let me down every year. I had him when Russ was on the team. I had him the next year, and he just ended up being a bench starter. Only put him in when my other running backs were on a bye week. And they also signed a running back that I used to be a huge fan of because I'm an Eagles fan. They signed Miles Sanders. Maybe my thoughts are a little bit biased because I still am a fan of Miles. I loved watching him be an Eagle. And he was really good when he was on the Eagles. And when he went to the Panthers and got that pretty decently sized contract for a player who only had a couple years on a rookie contract, that was good. You got to see how beneficial it is to have great offensive line play. Because Miles Sanders was not that good of a running back when he was on the Panthers. Now, I'm going to look at his stats from last year because I don't know them off the top of my head. But I do know when I read it the last time, it was not very good. He had 55 total carries last year. Wow, that's low. That is low. 55 carries, 205 yards, a 3.7 average, 2 touchdowns, and his longest run was 26 yards. Now, he is a receiving back, so I'll go over his receiving stats. Can't show this on screen, but he had 24 receptions, 148 yards, 6.2 average, 1 touchdown, and his longest reception was 33 yards. He had 1 fumble lost. Now, if we want, we can compare that to the last year he was on the Eagles. He had 17 games played, 259 carries, 1,269 yards, a 5.0, 4.9 average, 11 touchdowns. His longest run was 40 yards, and he only had 2 fumbles. Sorry, he had 1 fumble, and he did lose that fumble. So he went from 259 carries to 55 carries. He went from 1,269 rushing yards to 205 rushing yards, a 4.9 average to a 3.7, 11 touchdowns to 1 touchdown in 2023 and 2 in 2024. They paid him a lot of money to play for the Panthers, and he wasn't even the starting running back on the Panthers when it came to last year. Chuba Hubbard was their starter last year, but he wasn't making starter money. Miles was. Miles was making all that money. Luckily, Chuba, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, is on his rookie contract. Yeah, he's still on his rookie contract. He should be getting signed either this year or next year. The Cowboys did let go of Rico Dowdle, and Rico Dowdle ended up going to the Carolina Panthers, but I find it even more impressive what Chuba's done over the last couple years as a running back for the Panthers, seeing how abysmal Miles was as a running back there. Now, I know that's a lot of time spent on a player who's probably not going to do much in the NFL. Just had a lot of thoughts on Miles Sanders because I saw how good he could be as a running back when he played behind those big boys in Philadelphia. They've always had good offensive line play. And they've always had good defensive line play. Finally, that outlook pays off. The Eagles have been to 3 Super Bowls and won 2 since 2017, 2018. If I had to guess, I would assume that Javonte is probably going to be the starter and Miles is like a 3-down receiving back, once they compete in camp, one will turn up victorious for that starting position. Now we'll move on from the Cowboys and Miles Sanders. They have had a quiet offseason, and I wonder how much that has to do with Dak's contract, or is Jerry just tired of spending money with no success in return? Because the Cowboys have, at best, went to the second round of the playoffs. Those years that they had 12, 11, 13, 14 wins, and the only return they've had is a first round, second round at best appearance in the playoffs. Not a lot of return. Personally, I think it has a lot more to do with Dak's contract. The deeper and deeper he gets into the years on his contract, the more money that the team has to pay him every year. Generally, that's how contracts work. For instance, Jalen Hurts gets signed to a 4-year contract. 4 or 5 year contract. Let's just say 4 for the hypothetical. Let's say they're paying him annually, on average, $50 million a year. So that would be a 4-year, $200 million contract, correct? To free up money at the beginning of the contract, they go, we're going to give you a 4-year contract. We're going to give you $50 million on average, but we're going to pay you 30 this year, 35 the next year, and then split 170 over the last 2 years. Granted, they usually have some sort of clause to be able to get out of it in the last year and not have too much dead cap money. But still, teams get handcuffed to this, especially if their quarterback play isn't on par with what they're making. Hence why Deshaun Watson has handcuffed the Browns into a situation that they can't get out of. He's guaranteed all that money. All the money on his contract he's guaranteed, no matter how they divvy it up. When you fully guarantee all that money in a contract, you're going to have to pay it regardless. Whether he plays, whether he gets benched, whether he gets hurt. But that injury doesn't, cause him to retire. Outside of that, he's guaranteed all that money. Speaking of QBs, I think are getting paid way more than their value. Cooper Kupp signs with the Seattle Seahawks. $15 million a year. Cooper Kupp, DeMarcus Lawrence have had a decent offseason with 2 non-QB players, but they have Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp. I don't see it. I have no faith. I really don't. Sam Darnold getting that much money. Cooper Kupp going there, he deserves that money. I mean, I know Cooper's been hurt the last couple years, so his performance is kind of lacked. But if I am an owner, if I am a coach, if I am some sort of head of a football team, I personally cannot justify paying that much money to a QB who has had one good year. One good year. My dad and I were talking about this today because I wanted to know if my opinion was validated by other fans. Now, he is not a Seahawks fan. So let's just get that straight. He's not a Seahawks fan, so he has no bias in this situation. And I asked him, I said, do you have faith that Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp, with that coaching staff, will make that team competitive? In the aspect that they'll be a playoff team, that they may even be competitive in the aspect that they could win some playoff games, maybe even go to the Super Bowl. I told him, I just don't see Sam Darnold having that it factor. I don't see Cooper Kupp making his situation so much better that he can overcome bad QB play and a bad scheme. My dad essentially said that he thought Sam had a good year with the Vikings and that he has more faith in Sam's ability than I do. So we started having a discussion. I go, do you think that has a lot more to do with Sam's talent, Sam Darnold's talent, or a lot more to do with Kevin O'Connell being a quarterback's coach at heart, being a quarterback guru, as they used to say on ESPN back in the day, and with Justin Jefferson being on that team? He says, he being my dad says, well, that makes a lot of sense based on your opinion because of how Kirk Cousins has panned out in Atlanta. And I go, well, the only difference between Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold is that at least Kirk Cousins was good in Washington before he started getting coached by Kevin O'Connell. I remember vividly when Kirk was being let go from Washington, plenty of teams wanted him. There were plenty of teams that wanted to sign him to a contract. Even after his time with the Vikings, after his Achilles injury, plenty of teams wanted to sign him. And he kind of sits back and he looks at me and he goes, yeah, I guess you're right. I see Gino and Sam having the equal amount of ability when it comes to quarterback play, but at least Gino is a lot more elusive, can get out of the pocket, can scramble, get yards if he needs to. Sam Darnold, not fast, not elusive, not quick. He is a pocket passer. With how bad that offensive line is, with the Seahawks losing all of their wide receivers, granted they did pick up Cooper Kupp, but they lost Lockett and DK. I don't see it. When Kevin O'Connell took Sam Darnold to a 13-win team, 14-win team last year, it gave me a lot more faith that Kevin O'Connell is a damn good coach. And he could make anybody look good with his scheme. Derek Stingley signs the highest non-paid QB or wide receiver contract in the league with 3 years, $90 million. $90 million. He's getting paid an average of $22.605 million a year. New money 90. As you can see right there where it says new money 90. New money average 30. His average is 22 because they're just extending him. So essentially what this is saying is, there's 90 being added on to his already existing contract. Texans made a big splash with this. Derek Stingley is legit, and he is really good. I'm sure that's why the Texans decided to let go of the players that they let go of. Because they were waiting to have to put this contract on. Derek Stingley is legit. That LSU team with Chase and Justin Jefferson and Derek Stingley, they are making a lot of money in the NFL right now. A ton of money. I wish I had it broken down. If you look deep, and Joe Burrow. If you look deep into that LSU team, they are all making a lot of money. I would even go far as to say that out of any college football team that any of these players have been on, that team is making the most money in the NFL. Even if you consider everybody who's ever been on any of those teams ever. If you were to freeze in time for 1 year, every team that's played in the college football landscape, even Alabama, you look at any of Alabama's years, 18, 19, 20, whatever. LSU, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, whatever. You go, I'm going to look at just 1 year, see all the players that were on that team, and how much money every one of those players are making in the NFL based on the players that actually went to the NFL. That LSU team has to be making by far the most money. We've just been discussing him, but what are the Falcons going to do? What is their plan? He played 13 games, 14 games last year for the Falcons. Do they plan to bench him again for Michael Penix? Do they plan to try and trade him closer to the draft? Especially to quarterback-needy teams at the moment? I'm curious as to why they would wait to trade him. Having him on the team this long, past the deadline, gave Kirk an extra $10 million signing bonus. Why would they wait to trade him? Are they not just going to start Michael Penix? Did they just not have a lot of trade partners? Or does it have a lot more to do with Kirk not wanting to leave the Falcons? So many questions. Answers will prevail. Keeping him on the team this long has raised a lot of flags. A lot of red flags. Can you make him the backup? As an organization, can you afford to pay a backup quarterback that much money? Year in, year out. I assume that they are waiting until closer to the draft to make a decision like this. Teams are looking to trade up to get the quarterback that they want in the draft. If they can't, are they willing to seek trades? Pay big money for free agent QBs or trade market QBs. That's the only outcome I can see here. I don't see how you keep Kirk on the team as a backup, and I don't see how you make Penix the starter at the end of the year and then re-bench him again for Kirk Cousins. That would destroy any quarterback's confidence. There wasn't a lot of NFL offseason news over the last 5 days. Something I did see on Twitter just scrolling was DeAndre Hopkins going to the Baltimore Ravens to go play with Lamar Jackson. Have you realized how many top-end wide receivers on the outside of their prime have went to Baltimore? A lot. The Baltimore Ravens are a graveyard for old top-end wide receivers. That list includes Dez Bryant, Deshaun Jackson, Steve Smith Sr., Odell Beckham Jr., Jeremy Maclin, Anquan Bolden, now DeAndre Hopkins. Seems as if the Baltimore Ravens are willing to pay too much for too old of wide receivers because they aren't the best team at drafting wide receivers. And it's probably a difficult organization to recruit players to. It's cold. The city doesn't have a lot to do. It's much better since Lamar's been there. Just still not an organization and location like Miami or any of the California teams or Texas, which is probably why the Ravens have become a graveyard for once top-end wide receivers. I mean, think about it. If you ask any person in the world, let's just keep it to the U.S. If you ask any person in the U.S., if you could live anywhere, where would you live? It would be safe to assume that at least 65% of people will pick warm locations year-round. Warm locations year-round. Close to a beach. Why do you think all the Cali teams, all the Florida teams, Dallas, get top-end NFL free agent talent? They're one of the better places to live. I mean, even New York, you could argue. It's still cold in New York, but at least that city has a lot to do. You can go anywhere in the world from New York. You can fly anywhere. You can fly across the world. Even if you don't want to travel, New York essentially has it all anyway. So many cultures have mixed together there. You can get any food you want, any type of food you want. They have every store. They have every business. They're close to water. I mean, there's probably people that live right now in New York City that have never stepped foot outside of New York City. There's so much to do. Why would you go to the middle of nowhere? Not even talking about Baltimore. Why would you go to the middle of nowhere when the city you already live in has everything you would want already there? Why do you think locations that are less than seeked out have to pay players way more than teams that are in locations with ideal temperatures and ideal size of city. Right? Even Philadelphia probably has to pay players a little bit more than Dallas would, than Cali would, than San Fran would, than Miami would. Wasn't one of Tyreek Hill's answers, why did you go to Miami? Because it's Miami and it's warm all year round? I'm sure Baltimore has a lot to do. I'm not even talking trash on Baltimore. I'm just giving justification as to why it seems like every top end old wide receiver ends up having bad years there and retiring afterwards. Baltimore is willing to overpay because their location isn't super ideal. I will say, though, having Lamar there helps. That guy is legit. There ain't nothing that anybody can say about Lamar. He was good in college when he wasn't supposed to be. He was good in the NFL. Any of those coaches who said you should be a wide receiver or running back should get effing fired because they could not have been more wrong. How many of you saw that Vine? I don't know if it was Vine or an Instagram video then or TikTok of him destroying kids in high school. He was making it look like they had skates on. He was sprinting full speed, stopping on a dime, making a guy dive past him, look silly, and walking into the end zone. And he does that in the NFL because he's just better, faster, has more talent than everybody there. So I'm sure a lot of wide receivers will want to go there. DeAndre Hopkins may be old, but I'm sure he's not the only wide receiver that's willing to go and play with Lamar Jackson. Willing to go to Baltimore to play with Lamar Jackson. Even if you put Lamar Jackson on the Browns, sure, plenty of wide receivers would be willing to go to Cleveland to play with Lamar Jackson. Another story I've been following up on is, the NFL draft. Cam Ward, slotted to be the first overall draft pick in this year's draft. And even if the Titans move out of the first pick, I still see him going number one. Any team willing to move up to the number one pick is most likely drafting Cam Ward. Quarterbacks are just valued higher than every other player. I'm sure that there are players in this year's draft that will have better careers than both the top two quarterbacks in this year's draft, and Cam Ward and Shadir, right? But every year we see QBs go in that top 5, top 10. If you get a good QB, your team is set. That's why they put so much value on that position in the draft. But the story I've been following up on is not Cam Ward. I just assume he'll go first or second or third. The story I'm following up on is Shadir and what he's going to do. Because let's look past the Tennessee Titans. Sorry, I had to bring up the draft. I just want to make sure I get the order right. Let's cross off number one. That's Tennessee Titans. I assume they'll pick Cam Ward, correct? Cleveland's number 2. New York's number 3. Both QB needy teams. The Patriots number 4. I don't see them taking a QB when they have Drake May. I don't see why they would. Jacksonville, not in need of a QB. They already have one under contract. The Raiders did just sign Geno. Now, I wouldn't say that they're not a QB needy team. I just assume that when you pay a player that much money, you're probably going to play him. Now, they might be using Geno as kind of a stepping stone from drafting a rookie until he's ready to start. So I would put the Las Vegas Raiders in the maybe position of drafting a QB this year. The Jets did pick up Justin Fields. I would put them as a maybe, though. Panthers, definitely QB needy. If they can move up, if any of those QBs fall to number 8, which I assume that they won't, but if they do, Carolina Panthers will jump all over it. Saints do have Derek Carr. He's getting towards the end of his contract. Maybe. The Bears, not this year. I don't see either of these prospects being better than Caleb. Especially as, prospects. In 5 years, we'll look back and I'll probably be wrong. But the Bears, I don't see Ben Johnson drafting a QB this year. Niners, no, they're about to pay a lot of money. They're about to pay a lot of money to Brock Purdy. $45, $55 million a year. I wouldn't doubt it. The Cowboys, Dak's getting up there on his contract. If Jerry could go back in time knowing what he knows now, do you think he still offers that contract to Dak? I don't know. I really don't. The Dolphins? Maybe not. $14 is the Indianapolis Colts? Yes. Yes. The Colts have been in quarterback purgatory since Peyton left. Well, sorry, let me correct myself. Peyton left, Andrew gets drafted. But ever since Andrew retired early, they've been in quarterback purgatory. Drafting QBs, paying big money to QBs. They can never seem to get it right. Anthony Richardson, I wish he was a top 5 guy in the NFL. He's just so much fun to watch. But he has been lackluster. He's had some issues. He's been hurt. If the QBs think they're going to find, or if the Colts think they're going to find their guy at 14, if their guy falls in the draft, if their favorite QB falls to 14 in the draft, how do you pass up on that? If you're the Colts organization, how do you pass up on that? Falcons do have Penix, do have Kirk, maybe. Cardinals, contract's going to expire soon. I know I spent way too much time on that. Just to get into my next point. When reading all these stories, Shadir Sanders He's been talking about the Browns a lot lately, especially about the Browns being a franchise he would want to play for. After his camp made all those claims that there are certain franchises and teams he'd be unwilling to play for. He claims he only plays as the Browns on Madden. And it does benefit Shedeur that the Browns are in cap hell and handcuffed to a fully guaranteed Deshaun Watson contract with bad quarterback play. So their only two options at the moment are to either give up good non-quarterback players to open up cap space to pay a free agent quarterback, or draft a rookie so that they only have to play and pay rookie contract money. The Browns didn't let go of Garrett. They did not let go of Myles Garrett this year. They paid him all that money. So they have even less money to pay at other positions. They can't get out of the Deshaun Watson contract because no team in their right mind is going to trade for Deshaun and trade for that contract. Every day passes and the Browns seem more and more likely that they're the draft spot for Shedeur. Even if, for whatever reason, the Titans pass on Cam Ward and draft Shedeur Sanders, I see the Browns as being a likely spot to draft Cam Ward as well, right? Now, the smart thing to do in this situation is just to pick the best player available. Deal with bad QB play. Pay all that contract out. Get rid of Deshaun Watson. And then make a move. Especially if they don't think Shedeur is just the best talent available at number 2. Now, if it were me, there's too much emphasis, too much put on quarterback draft position in the NFL. But I understand it. I get it. Any team would do it. If you need a QB, draft a QB. If he's good, he's going to make your team good. Joe Burrow made the Cincinnati Bengals a terrible franchise into a competitive franchise. Lamar Jackson. The Baltimore Ravens were good when they had that good defense in the early 2000s. After that, they had ins and outs. Patrick Mahomes. Now, I know that the year that Patrick got drafted, they were good. I'm not disagreeing with that, but before that, there were a lot of bad years. Before Baker Mayfield got drafted by the Browns, how good were the Browns? They were awful. The only thing that was good about the Browns the 10 years before they drafted Baker was Peyton Hillis getting on the cover of Madden. Who remembers Peyton Hillis? That was crazy. Cannot believe that he ended up on the cover of Madden and then just kind of disappeared. The Seahawks, before drafting Russell, how good were they? Like, you need a good QB to be competitive. Their situation is just compelling as to why Shedeur might go so high. You can't not draft him there if you're number 2, right? It's kind of a bad position to be in. If they don't draft him, I imagine that the Giants will. Now, if the top 15 draft picks all had great QBs, he would fall to 15. and they would just draft the next best available player, regardless of position. Now, there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys in this year's draft. Ashton, Jancy, Travis Hunter, who is just the best athlete in the draft. I don't know how you don't argue. I don't know how you can argue that. He played an insane amount of snaps in college, offense and defense. Every year. Seems like the Browns need a QB. This year they need a QB. Last year they needed a QB. Deshaun Watson was not that answer. Cleveland seems more and more likely that that's going to be the landing spot for Prime's kid. We're going to move on from the NFL. Let's talk March Madness. Selection Sunday just happened a couple days ago. There's definitely a team who is in the bracket that shouldn't have been. The North Carolina Tar Heels. Definitely a team who was snubbed. West Virginia Mountaineers. Now, the way the voting and selection committee selects these teams needs to be shown to the public to give justification for the reasoning for voting each team that they do. Based on their justification, I don't see how North Carolina met the standards over a team like West Virginia, especially with their abysmal performance against who they claim to be quad one competition. Outside of North Carolina sneaking in and West Virginia getting snubbed, the rest of the brackets seem to have went well. Hundreds of bracketologists filled out brackets before Selection Sunday, and not a single one of them had North Carolina on their brackets. Bracketologists aren't just random people off the street that they go, who do you think should be in the March Madness bracket this year? These bracketologists literally spend their entire time studying and watching college basketball as a way to fill their brackets in the most accurate way possible. Now, West Virginia University releases a statement on North Carolina getting in and them being snubbed. And they announced that they won't compete in any other postseason tournaments. And they did have a press release, a live stream, where one of the director of athletics talked and spoke about this situation and said that he wants to sue the NCAA for what happened for them being snubbed out of the tournament this year. $14 SEC teams made it. 14. Wild. The SEC has taken over football, and now they're taking over basketball. I'm not sure who I have winning the tournament this year. It kind of scares me that I want to pick Duke, especially with Cooper Flagg being injured. Rolling his ankle after attempting to bring down a rebound. I'm assuming that he won't play in the first round. So if Duke loses that first round, we may not even see Cooper Flagg play in March Madness. 40% of people betting on winners of March Madness have picked Duke. That would be a huge reason as to why I would not want to pick Duke to win the tournament this year. Do you know how much money betting sites, legal betting sites like FanDuel or DraftKings or ESPN Bet, do you realize how much money that they would lose if Duke wins the tournament after having 40% of people betting on future bets like Duke winning the March Madness tournament? They would lose so much money. They can't have that happen. Now, I'm not saying they'll rig games, but what I'm saying is they want you to place bets that will lose. Because the more bets you lose, the more money they make as an organization, right? If 40% of people are betting on one thing, and that one thing wins, they lose a lot of money. Especially because I'm assuming future bets pay out pretty well. You're guessing that this one team out of 64 won the tournament? I don't imagine that those odds are minus 1,000. I imagine that those odds are pretty good. But every year, teams lose games they're not supposed to lose. Teams win games they're not supposed to win. That's the beauty of March Madness, baby. That's why we all watch it every March. It is so much fun to watch. Even the women's tournament is so much fun to watch. Now, I'm not a Duke fan. I'm not a fan of any team in or out of the bracket this year. I just enjoy it because I like watching basketball. I like college basketball. Even if I was a fan of, let's say, Alabama or Florida, you're going to watch the bracket just to see how your team does. You're going to watch every game just to see how your team does. How the bracket is going to stack up in your favor or against your favor, right? But no one wants to see a unhealthy Duke team win. There's not a person in this world who can honestly say, I don't want to see Cooper Flagg in the tournament. He's that much fun to watch. He really is. Even if I'm a fan of the team he's playing, I want to see Cooper play. I was excited to see the Eagles play Patrick Mahomes this year because Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. I wouldn't have wanted to watch that Super Bowl before knowing the outcome if they had a backup QB playing. You want to see the best compete against the best. And the beauty of March Madness is that the best can get beat by any team, regardless of where they're ranked. I hope he's healthy. I hope he can come back earlier than I expect. I assume he'll not play the first game. And I hope Duke can get past the first round of the tournament so that we can see him play. Granted, he's young. Hopefully that wasn't too bad of an ankle injury. I know that the x-rays came back negative. He didn't break his ankle or anything, or obviously we would know, and he wouldn't be on the tournament this year. The injury wasn't so bad that he wouldn't be able to play after just recovering. I'm assuming he just sprained it, just landed wrong. He got high up there though when he brought down that rebound. He was flying. I swear he was like 6 feet in the air. The bottom of his foot to the ground was like 6 feet, it seemed like. He just landed on somebody's foot and rolled it. It happens. Countless injuries happen. The scary ones are the ones where there's no contact. Another injury that has happened, granted this one is keeping the player out the rest of the year, is out of the NBA. Shams posted on Twitter that Paul George is out the rest of the year. He received injections in his left abductor muscle and left knee on Monday, and he got ruled out for the rest of the season. Now, let's be honest. Didn't really matter that much. As a person evaluating a team's talent, didn't really matter that much. Didn't matter if he played the rest of the year or didn't play. The Sixers have failed to live up to high expectations. They failed to even get close to those expectations. They've been abysmal this year. It doesn't help that Joel Embiid is hurt, not playing. Even before Paul George got ruled out, his performance wasn't very good. Fell short of top-end starter money he's been paid to play for the 76ers this year. That entire team has been carried by Tyrese Maxey. I will say I've always been a fan of Paul George. Always. Been a fan of Paul George since his days in Indiana. But I bet we all agree that horrible leg injury, he just hasn't been the same. It's never allowed him to reach his full potential as an NBA player. A lot of comparisons to another player that I was a huge fan of, bought all of his shoes when they first came out, Derrick Rose. Derrick wasn't the same after that knee injury. Is there anybody that disagrees? He was winning MVPs, carrying the Bulls to the playoffs, hitting game-winning shots, dunking on everybody, to where are Derrick Rose now videos? Same with Paul George. I will say, though, Paul George has definitely had a lot better moments than Derrick Rose. At least Paul has been still a above average, still getting paid top end money. He's had his moments. He's been in the playoffs a couple times. They fell short. Playoff P. His podcast is incredible. Paul George has still at least been a lot better than Derrick Rose. Paul George will probably be a Hall of Famer. But something felt special about Paul when he was in Indiana. And only a little bit of that it factor has disappeared from his game. Still an incredible shooter. Can still probably score on anybody in the NBA. I definitely could be wrong. I just thought that he was going to be the best player in the NBA. Thought maybe he could carry a team by himself as the best player on the team to championships. Watching those Indiana versus Miami playoff games were a lot of fun. They never won, but they made it close, and they gave him a run for their money. Paul goes to Oklahoma City. anyone watching the NBA, would you say that he was the best player on that team? Would anybody say that Paul was the best player on the Clippers? If you would have asked me before the leg injury, would every team that Paul ends up on, would he be the best player on that team? I probably would have said yes. Like LeBron or Steph, you put them on any team. Any team. There are very, very, very few players that you could make the argument that they're not the best player on the team, right? With Paul, I would say there's a lot more players. I love Paul George. I love everything he's done. I love his personality. I love his game. I just thought that he was going to be something to behold, like a Steph Curry, like a LeBron James, like a Luka. And he's not. He hasn't been ever since that leg injury. I don't know. And maybe I just held him in too high regards then. And he was always supposed to be that player, even if he never had that leg injury. LeBron's still out with a groin injury. And I've watched the last couple Lakers games without LeBron in the lineup. And Luke has been dropping crazy numbers. I mean, just crazy. But I will say the Lakers have looked pretty average as a basketball team, losing games that they shouldn't. And it could just be growing pains, learning how to fit Luka into the system. JJ Redick not understanding how to scheme around him. I don't agree with that statement. I think JJ Redick could figure it out fast, quick, in a hurry. I think if anything, it's just the players not understanding how to play around him. Because with Luka, it's kind of just like a sit back, let him do his magic. If he can't find anything, he'll pass it out. If he passes it to you, he's probably going to want the ball back because Luka needs the ball in his hands to do what Luka does best. Now, it doesn't matter because guess what? Luka's shown that he can carry his team, being the best player on the team, to an NBA titles run, right? I mean, they went to the NBA Finals last year. Granted, they lost. They still went, and Luka was the best player on that team. You could make the argument that Luka was the best player on the entire court with both teams out there. The only player you could argue is better than him is Jason Tatum. And even at that, I would say it's an argument. I think it's just the Lakers not having the right players around them. The Lakers not having the money to be able to afford different players, different, better players around them. Now, Austin Reeves has gone off. He's been lights out. He's been lights out this year. I just didn't like how the Lakers looked without LeBron. Didn't feel right. Didn't sit right. But it didn't feel like something that they couldn't fix, you know? Just felt like growing pains of some sort. I hope they figure it out because I want to see the Lakers be competitive in the playoffs. Not just be in the playoffs, but be competitive. Another team we talked about last week was that the Warriors looked damn good with Jimmy Butler. But then I'm watching last night's game, and they lost to the Nuggets without Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, right? They could not stop Aaron Gordon whatsoever. He dropped 38 points. 38 points. Russell Westbrook had a triple-double. Michael Porter Jr., 21 points. Now, a bit of this is regurgitating what I've heard other analysts say, but Steph looked tired, man. And I even seen that when I was watching. I'm not just seeing what an analyst is saying and regurgitating it, but I just agreed with their statements. Steph looked tired. And I'm not sure if it's age or emotion or having to continuously carry the team and franchise on his back. Like, let's be honest, since KD left, he's had to carry that franchise because every year after that, Klay was hurt. Even when Klay returned from that injury, did he ever look the same? I would say he still doesn't look the same. On the Mavs, does he look like Klay of that 70 and whatever roster, the best record of all time? I was doing the math and looking it up. Steph's played an average of 35 minutes for 16 seasons, and that's not including the 147, almost 2 full seasons, 147 games in the playoffs. Imagine what that does to your body as you age. Even all the time he spent training and making sure his body is right. Same with, I would make this argument with LeBron. It has nothing to do with Steph. I would make this argument with any player who's played an extensive amount of time in any sport. Tom Brady. All that time spent training in the offseason. With Steph, with LeBron, they also have to talk on the amount of content that he has to put out for not only the team, but to build his own brand. I don't think fans realize the time and effort these players have to put in to be the best at what they do. The organizations they play for definitely use them to capitalize off the success of them, right? If LeBron is your best player, if Luke is your best player, if Steph's your best player, do you not want to figure out any way to market that? You want fans to come to the game. You want fans to buy jerseys. You want fans to buy ticket sales. You want fans to buy NBA contracts. In NBA season pass contracts is what I mean, right? You want fans to buy the NFL or NBA season pass. You want them to buy liquor at the game. You want them to buy popcorn at the game. You want them to buy popcorn. You want them to pay to stay in the hotel that's next to the stadium. You want them to buy hats. You want them to buy shirts. You know, it could go on and on and on. So, like, not only that, but these players want to capitalize off their own success. So they have to do it for the team, then they have to do it for themselves. Every offseason, Steph's in the golf tournament with all the famous people. Steph has his own brand of shoe. He's got a market for that. Not just the shoes, but the, sports apparel. He's got a post about it. Like, it is so much time not spent on doing basketball because you're the best at basketball. These players can't play it forever, so they have to figure out some way to brand themselves so that even when they do retire, they still have some door to lean on. Why do you think Jordan created the shoes that he created? Still runs the company that he created? So if Steph has a bad night, fans got to realize that he's not only training, he's got to eat right, he's got to get the best sleep, he's got to travel all the time, he's got to sleep in hotels. They played 80 whatever games a year. That's insane how much travel that is. And he's getting up there in age. I'm sure he wants to spend all the time with his kids and wife. So, like, it just kind of weighs on you. So, these players are definitely going to have bad nights every once in a while. LeBron's not perfect. He's been close to for as long as he's been playing. But he did look tired. Steph looked tired. Pretty sure that's why Steve Kerr had to do a press release saying, like, I need to give Steph a day off every once in a while. These other players got to figure it out. Can't rest everything on his shoulders. I thought that point about how much the best player on the better teams has to do for the organization, thought that was interesting, because that's a lot of time. You take any average Joe Schmo in the world, you say, you not only have to work your job for 40 plus hours a week, but guess what? You also don't ever get to sleep at home. You don't ever get to see your family. You only get to see let's say you get to only see your family half the time. You don't get to sleep at home half the time. You got to sleep in hotels. Not only that, you have to bust your ass and be the best at your job, but you also have to post on social media all the time. You got to train when you're not in work to do the things that you do in work. And if you want to capitalize off the success that you're having at work, oh, guess what? You also have to build your own brand. Now, these players do it because it's a lot of money. Who wouldn't do it for that much money? It's the same argument that people make where they go, Brad Pitt, all he's got to do is get paid to work out and stay in shape and then act for 3 months out of the year for every movie he does. There's very few people that would turn down at least an opportunity to see if they could do it. You come to me and you say, hey, Dev, we're going to give you $20 million. But in 9 months, you have to be ripped, have a perfect tan, and then come spend 6 months with us and film a movie. Who is turning that down? I'm just not the best actor. Definitely didn't get the genetics or the ability to be even any sort of semi-professional athlete. But I do like sports. I do watch it. Do enjoy playing it. But mostly just enjoy watching and talking about it. I think that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. There was a lot to talk about. I will say that I won't always just talk about sports. Most of it's going to be about sports, but I also do want to talk about some entertainment news, whether it's movies, TV, whatever. So every once in a while, we'll talk about that at the end of the episode too. But there wasn't too much news this week. I'm sure more will come towards the draft and NFL offseason and NBA playoff picture news, March Madness news. We're going to have some games this week. MLB starting. So there will be a lot of news to talk about. Just not too much this week. The holiday. Mostly just March Madness stuff. I do appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to leave a comment, like, share, subscribe. And I will definitely catch you during the next episode. All right, guys, have a good night. Have a good day tomorrow. And as always, I'll see you next episode. Peace.